Welcome to another edition of Courageous Conversations Live. I'm your host, Pierre Quinn, and joining me on this episode of Courageous Conversations is Jason Marshall. Jason, thanks for being my guest today.
Thanks for having me, Pierre.
So looking forward to our conversation. I know those of you right now are stopping the scroll. You're trying to figure out what's going on. This is Courageous Conversations. This is a show where we leverage the stories of creatives, of leaders, of entrepreneurs to help you live and lead with greater courage. So we'd love for you to check in with us in the comment section if you're watching on LinkedIn. Also, if you're watching on Facebook and YouTube. And if you got any questions for Jason throughout our conversation today, drop those in. We're going to be talking about old constructs for new leaders and a lot of leadership stuff. So drop those comments in, drop those questions in, and we'll get to as many as we can before our time runs out. Okay, Jason, set us up. Give us the snapshot, the Cliff Notes version, that 60-second commercial about who you are and what you do.
All right. So who I am today is I am a Clifford D. Clark Diversity Fellow and PhD candidate at Binghamton University. And what that means is I'm in a PhD program, and all I have left to do is do my dissertation. So I'm almost there. I've done all the coursework. And so I do research on leadership, and leadership has pretty much been my life for the last 10 years or so, maybe longer. I don't know. So that's what I research now. So now I do it from a research lens, whereas before I did the consulting thing. I really enjoyed that. But now I had those unanswered questions, and now I'm digging into answering some of those questions through my research.
So let's go back a little bit in the timeline, Jason. Reading your bio, give us the law enforcement piece and then the consulting piece that finally led up to the doctoral student area of life for you.
Yeah, I mean, isn't that like a typical path to a PhD? You start out as a tribal cop, and then yeah. So I never really liked school actually when I was younger, and so and I was really interested in like detective shows and that sort of thing. And so early in my undergrad, I started off in engineering, thinking, I can make good money. I'm good at math. I'll do that. But quickly I discovered like, well, that's a 5-year program, and I'm not really interested in a 5-year program. And the math seems boring. This criminal justice thing seems pretty cool, and I could go be a detective. So, and I could get out in 4 years. And so that was kind of, no real long-term thinking. I just thought I kind of enjoy it as 4-year program. So I did a 4-year program in criminal justice, got hired by my tribe as a tribal police officer. And after a few years of doing that, I thought, okay, this isn't quite as intellectually stimulating as I had hoped. And I don't see that changing anytime soon. Not really a lot of growth potential. And so I started thinking about like MBA programs, online MBA programs, but I was pretty comfortable. So I just kept hanging around. And then I met a girl who's not my wife, and she was moving down to Bowling Green, Kentucky. And we dated long distance for a year. I figured we probably wouldn't make it any longer than that. So I was like, this is my chance. I've been looking for a career change, and Brittany's down there. They have an MBA program down there. So I took the leap and entered the MBA program to be with Brittany to explore my, unrealized potential, pursue some additional interests. And so I did the MBA program. And that's what led me down the consulting path, which I did for 6 years, and then eventually had more unanswered questions, which led me eventually to where I am now doing research.
So that's when our paths crossed in Bowling Green, Kentucky, when you were doing consulting work there. Can you demystify a little bit of the consulting space? Because when people hear consulting or what they see on social media or sometimes even television shows, or even when they think of, the big 4 or 5 consulting firms, there's this sort of austere, elevated perception of what the consulting world is and what it looks like. Can you kind of demystify some of that for us? And when it really comes down to it, what is consulting, especially in the leadership space, organizational development space, really all about?
So in the leadership space, I think it's slightly different than that perception. So at least the way I approach it. So I don't come in there and just give you all the answers, and we're not going to, pull some book off the shelf and say, here's the program that you have to implement. So I was much more of an exploratory, get in there, figure out what's going on, have these conversations with individuals in leadership positions there, figure out what they perceive to be the issues, and then we work to develop a customized solution. So I realized that's not scalable. I wasn't looking to be, one of the big three consulting firms. I was more interested in solving problems at the organizational level.
Mhm.
And so I realized it's not scalable. And if I had gone a different route, perhaps I would have had to do some more scalable approaches. But for me, it was really just figuring out what the issues were and how do we solve those issues. And we'll take it one company at a time. And of course, there's some overlap. And so as I continue to do that, I could take lessons I learned from company XYZ and apply it to companies ABC down the road. But the original intent was just let's just take it one company at a time.
So how does a guy who is not really in love with school have how do you have so much success in your doctoral program? Because sometimes when people think of doctoral work, they think, oh man, that's where all the super smart people are, and I'll never be able to keep up, and it'll be daunting and overwhelming. What were even some things that you've learned as in from law enforcement and then in the consulting space that you leveraged to contribute to your success in the doctoral world?
That's a very good question, and I have a couple different ways I could answer this.
Yeah.
So my interests really evolved in education when I went back to the MBA program.
Mhm.
And it seems as if so you can picture education like a funnel in undergrad or when early in your academic career, it's really broad and really wide. And a lot of that seemed, to be frank, it seemed useless to me. I just didn't see the application. But once I, went farther down the funnel, I got into MBA. I thought, aha, I see lots of applications here. And so I'd stay after class and I'd talk to professors, and I was just like really intrigued. And the business world really caught my attention. I grew up in a very small town where, of course, there are businesses, but it wasn't like a business feel. And
Mm.
so the MBA program introduced me to that intrigue and the allure of the business community, and it got me really curious. And so my curiosity began to develop, and I realized that okay, that's what education is pursuing curiosities. And the farther you go down that funnel, the more you get to pursue your own curiosities. And so that's what I do now in my PhD program is I go after answers that I'm really curious about. And that's fun. And I just like, that's almost all I want to do now. I really, really enjoy that aspect of it. So what I benefited from my previous careers that's helping me most now is just yesterday I had a conversation with a friend and I compared the PhD program to the police academy. And there's a lot of hoops you have to jump through. And
Mm.
some of them you'd prefer not to jump through. But if you can just commit your mind to say, no matter what hoops they make me jump through, I'll jump through them. They can tell me to jump through several ridiculous hoops. I'll jump through all of them. There's nothing that's going to happen to me in this program that's going to mentally defeat me. Just like that was my mindset going into the police academy. And once you commit to that mentally, you just work through, jump through every hurdle, through every hoop, and just know you're going to keep pushing forward. And so that has really helped mentally prepare me for the challenge of the program.
We got another Bowling Green area guy checking in with us on Courageous Conversations Live. Clay Smalley, good to see you, sir, hanging out with us. We're having a conversation with Jason Marshall, and we're talking about really his leadership journey, now his doctoral work, and the insights that he has gained along the way. So share with us, Jason, a little bit of how being in a doctoral program, looking at leadership and business allowed you to maybe see an old concept, an old paradigm, an old theory, but because of your research and your interaction with it, able to pivot it and apply it to a totally new generation of students.
So that's an interesting framing. I was wondering how my framing from the academic space would translate to somebody in your space. And so, yeah, I like that framing. So let me try to answer the question. What I'm doing is looking at what I call old constructs in new ways.
Mhm.
And what I mean by that is like there are concepts such as CIP leadership style, charismatic, ideological, pragmatic. So this has been studied for 20 years at least. And what they have identified is that there are at least three predominant styles that leaders use when they communicate with individuals. But they've always studied that by looking back at historical documents and biographies that are written about these, leaders of yesteryear. but it's difficult to do that when you're talking about, real leaders today.
Mhm.
And so what I've done is I've used the words that they speak through addresses, speeches, interviews, that sort of thing. This these real live conversations like we're having today, and I analyze that text. And so from the words that they use, I was able to differentiate among these C, I, and P leadership styles to then predict what type of style other individual current leaders are today, or whether those styles change over time. Does it depend on the situation? These were questions that I've always believed to be the case, but I wasn't able to prove that, and the old methodologies weren't able to prove that. By doing it this way, you can look at things in real time and over time and get at those answers.
I want to ask you, Jason, about teaching leadership in the digital space and in the virtual world. If you go to your website, jasondmarshall.com, you'll see some reviews of your students and a list of some of the classes that you've taught, even in the virtual context, even over Zoom. How do we navigate that, not just as academics, not just as professors, but from a learning and development perspective, from I'm a trainer in a company and I want to share these leadership insights. How do I best do that to even follow some of the success that you've had in training in a virtual context?
So the virtual context could be an excuse.
Hmm.
It could be an easy say, I'm typically a pretty good teacher,
Hmm.
but this virtual thing, it's just so hard, and students aren't paying attention and they're all distracted. And I didn't want that.
Hmm.
And so I mentally committed to there's no excuse, it's just an opportunity to do things differently. And so I just found different ways to engage students. And there's some things you can do better online. For example, this past semester, I was teaching 280 students at a time.
Wow.
It's pretty difficult to have courageous conversations with 280 students at a time, but you can do that in a smaller group. And so using Zoom, for example, we use breakout rooms,
Hmm.
and you could get into small groups of 4 or 5 and have really difficult, challenging conversations. And then we come back together and I debrief in the large group. And so there are some advantages that you can't have in a big lecture hall. So first off, there are no excuses. Play like a champion, all the time. It doesn't matter. And of course, you lose some richness, but you can gain some things as well. So there are pros and cons to both aspects. And really, as long as you're centered on and you care about the learning of the students or the participants, the employees, then you do what it takes to make it happen.
Now, and notice transitioning, putting a pause on the consulting space as you're finishing your doctoral work and looking at the next stage of opportunities that come from doing that. But I gotta go old school a little bit. Gotta pull back and gotta jump in the time machine a little bit and gotta go old school. I gotta ask you about Amiibo Leadership. I can't let you get away. Can you give us the framework of how you developed that particular concept and how you used it in your consulting work in the past?
Sure. So the idea was that every individual is an amoeba, and essentially an amoeba has a solid nucleus. So your personality, your traits, like who you are, the kind of is at your core. But you're always moving, you're always adapting to meet the needs of the social and situational demands that are placed on you by the environment. And so that's the concept of Amiibo leadership, is that of course you are who you are. We don't want you to change who you are. But as soon as you become fixed, then you try to be a square peg in a round hole or a round peg in a square hole. We know that doesn't work. And we never really encounter these square or round situations. There are always these odd, weird shapes that maybe we've never seen before. And so by being an amoeba leader, you keep your core and your nucleus, but you kind of adapt your exterior to fit those situations.
I'd love that concept when you shared it several years ago. Can't wait to see what the introduction or discussion of that looks like in the future as you continue your work. Anthony Bolden checking in with us from Chicago. He says, looking forward to grabbing as much content as possible before my work meeting. So, Jason, let's look at leadership today. There's a lot that's going on. We have a new generation of leaders coming into into the marketplace and into the landscape. And then you have a generation of leaders who have been here really for a long time and don't really have plans for even moving off of the landscape. So we have this existence, this really synergy, or hopefully a synergy, of leading across generations. What can the older, more seasoned generation of leaders gain by not just pouring into, but learning from the current leaders who are entering the landscape?
So at the center of all of that, I would say, is a commitment to learning, to constantly learning. So if you're young, you're learning from the people who have traveled the path before you. And if you're one of the older, more seasoned leaders, then you commit to learning from the young folks. And none of us have perfected it. None of us will perfect it. So there are always things to be learned. And as long as you're open to those learning opportunities, you don't know where they may come from. You may pick up some insights stopping at the gas station to fill up your car in the morning, or driving through the drive-through. You might learn something about customer service. It was my pleasure to serve you. Wow, that's an interesting concept. So you never know where that learning might come from. And so as long as you're open, doesn't matter young or old, or what industry you're working in, what profession you're working in, as long as you're open to learning, then you're open to improving your leadership style. And so from that aspect, I think it's a commitment to always improving, always being better, and not discriminating where you're getting that information from.
I know you've had some great experiences as a cop. You've had some great experiences as a consultant. And now give us one of those great experiences in the doctoral journey where maybe after teaching a class, maybe after talking with other doctoral students or professor, working on a project or writing a paper, you walked away from that experience saying, yep, this is one of the reasons why this outcome, it has been worth all the blood, sweat, tears, sleepless nights, all the sacrifice to do it. This is one of those sort of watershed moments. What has been one of those moments for you?
So I'll give you an example from Monday because it's top of mind. So Monday, the way we set up the teaching this semester, we did team teaching, and I took the first third of a semester. One of my colleagues took the second third, and so on and so forth. So I technically wrapped up my teaching last week. Well, I had a meeting with a student on this Monday. So my obligations are done. The student has no reason to consider my opinion whatsoever. Yet she reached out to me to have this meeting on Monday. So we had the meeting, and the meeting was around the topic of diversity in organizations. We spent a week on that topic during my portion of the class, and she wanted to talk more about it. And we talked for an hour and a half, and she had to go to class. So like, who knows how long that conversation could have gone. Mm-hmm. And the point is that that's a difficult, challenging conversation. It's an important conversation. It's a very difficult topic to cover in a week. I mean, you can just get the tip of the iceberg barely. Yeah. But my goal was to build intrigue in students and to generate some self-exploration, some self-inquiry. And that was very clear in that one student. And who knows what that could turn into? Who knows how many other students were impacted, but didn't quite have the courage to reach out and talk to me. But I took that as a win. And it was very exciting to think that, okay, what can we turn this into? And she had some ideas of how we could improve that as well.
Gotta love those experiences where, something that you said in the lecture, or something that you wrote, a portion of an assignment you gave to students, it really became a catalyst, unlocked some things for them, and really put them in a place to be hungry for more and continue the conversation. Elijah Oliver checking in with us, says, great work, Jason. Listen, I'm gonna start plugging Jason even before we get to the shameless plug portion, which is coming up real soon. But if you, I know Jason is a doctoral student. I know it. He is also an incredible speaker, trainer, and consultant. I'm not telling you what I've heard. I'm telling you what I've seen, what I've experienced myself. We've done some work together. So that being said, Jason, this is shameless plug time on Courageous Conversations. Give us URLs. We got jasondmarshall.com. In addition to that, who are you looking to connect with? Who should click on your profile on LinkedIn? If they're not on LinkedIn, if they're watching on Facebook or YouTube, who should go to jasondmarshall.com and shoot you a message? Who are you looking really to connect with at this time?
All right. So here's who I'm hoping to reach. If you've ever heard of a group called the PhD Project, if you have not heard of them, check out their website, phdproject.org. And that's who I want to pitch. And so PhD Project is the reason I'm in the PhD program today. It's a group that's dedicated to increasing the diversity in the workplace. And the way they do that is through encouraging and promoting individuals of diverse backgrounds, African American, Hispanic American, Native American, to pursue PhDs in business. And so I never considered a PhD in business. Like I said, I didn't even like school before. But here I am, I'm having the time of my life. I feel more true to myself than I've ever been. And there's a huge need for individuals of different backgrounds to be represented in the business research and the business teaching community and in the workforce. We know that's a thing. And so the PhD project is dedicated to increasing representation from underrepresented groups. And if you're even just remotely curious about what this might look like, feel free to reach out to me because they gave me an all expenses paid trip to Chicago. And that's the only reason I went to learn more about the PhD project. And here I am. So that their marketing technique worked. They have an annual conference in Chicago each year, and last year it was virtual. But it doesn't really cost you anything but some time. You can go learn about what it takes to continue on a PhD journey. There's good money in being a business PhD faculty. A lot of starting salaries are around like $130,000. And so it's not like you'd be giving up one thing to pursue something, a life of poverty. That's not the case. And so it's a good profession, a good career, and you can really have a positive impact. So that's my target audience.
Love it. Thanks for sharing, Jason. Thanks for being a part of this conversation. I'm grateful for your work and to be connected to you as a colleague. Looking forward to the next time we're able to work together. And I want to thank you in advance for the people who are going to reach out to you. They're going to go to jasondmarshall.com or they're going to click on your profile on LinkedIn and make the connection. So just want to thank you in advance for how you will support them. And thank you for being a guest on Courageous Conversations.
I appreciate it, Pierre. It was great chatting with you.
We'll talk soon, okay?
All right. Take care.